I don't know you, I believe y'all know what this is then, right? What is that, Mike?
Oh yeah. I don't know.
I'm gonna ask questions, so and y'all gonna teach me. That's a controversial thing, isn't it? All right, wait a minute. Let me back up. What is that?
Is that what you use for alligators?
It's a fish. Well, but it's a fish hook. We're gonna say we're catching a fish with it. I forgot I'm getting close to gator country. If I want to catch a coyote, which tool am I going to use? They're tools, aren't they? If I'm going to catch a fish, am I right? Well, why wouldn't I use that one to catch a fish? I could probably catch a coyote with that one, but it wouldn't be ethical, would it? What I'm saying is, if I were fishing, this is the right tool for the job. But I'm not fishing. I'm trying to catch coyotes or bobcats or whatever. So this is the right tool for the job. And if that tool's been around, it's been improved, but it's been around since before America became America. And if there were a better tool, we would be using it. You wouldn't have to make a law to make us use it. We'd have it in our truck. We'd throw all these, you know what an atlatl is? An atlatl was what the Indians used before they knew what a bow and arrow was. It was a little stick with a hook and it had a spear, and they sort of flipped it at a deer or something. And when some Indian figured out how to make a bow and arrow, they threw all them atlatls in the ditch or something and got rid of them. And that's the same thing with these traps. Until there's a better tool, this is what we got. And this is what all the controversies about, and what all the, a buddy of mine in Montana sent me a picture yesterday, a big billboard in Montana talking about the cruel traps. Well, I dare to say that is no more cruel than that is. Am I right? And I'm glad you guys aren't anti-trappers, or we'd have a big fight right now. But I'm here. Chip asked me to speak on associations, I think. Is that right? Trapping associations. And trapping associations to me is like the National Rifle Association is for everybody own a gun. You got children, grandchildren. Are we members of the NRA? There you go. Well, that's the same thing trappers are. Unfortunately, trappers don't have an amendment in the Constitution to protect our stuff. So we got this onslaught of antis that want to put us out of business. They want to take our stuff away from us. In the South right now, we're in pretty good shape, thank God. It hasn't always been that way. In Alabama, where I'm from, I think we're in the best shape we've been in my lifetime as far as the game and fish and just the general public view of trappers and trapping. It's not so around the rest of the country. Rhode Island is against the law. New Jersey is trying their best to put a stop to it right now. The antis have pretty much shut California down. Nevada is very restricted. Colorado, you can only use a cage trap. You can't use a steel trap. I think Florida is wide open, am I right? Or no? No, Louisiana is what I'm thinking of. You can't use a leg hold in Florida, all right? I didn't know that. I'm sorry, I didn't know that.
They had the worst outbreak of rabies like 2 years after they shut down.
Yeah, we've got rabies issues in Alabama now in several places. We do. The northeast corner of Alabama is rabies central, I think, in the coon population. In the coon, yep. They did have somebody at Montgomery bit the other day with a gray fox that was rabid.
Getting a lot of our areas, South Alabama, Baldwin County, gray foxes. It's all over the news.
Yeah. What happened? How's the quail population in Mississippi? Yeah, same thing it is in Alabama. In fur prices, you know, used to drive the harvest, I guess. When I was a young fella, in 1981, I bought a brand new Chevrolet pickup truck at the dealership with my fur check. And I'll never do that again. I may buy an 81 Chevy now with my fur check, but it'll just be a junker. It won't be. But back then, coon hunters, everybody, I mean, there was no roadkill. Somebody scooped it up even if they didn't hunt or trap because you could sell it. And it kept the population in check. And in '87, the fur market crashed, and it's never really, Bobby can tell you all this. He handles a lot of fur. But, and now the woods are full of varmints. They're just full of, and the roads are, there's roadkill everywhere. And I think that's what happened to our quail. I've heard biologists say the habitat's changed and this, and I don't think it's all the other birds and stuff are still around. I think ground nesting birds suffer when we have a overabundance of predators. Speaking of 1981, when I was a young kid in the 70s, we didn't have like this where people put on trapping demos and you could learn. It was a sort of a big secret because guys made a living. They fed their families. And so nobody would let you know. So I worked with an old trapper that I guess you'd call it being an apprentice, maybe. Nobody does that anymore either, do they? Everybody wants to be the expert, you know, next week. But yeah, we didn't have YouTube. We didn't know what a cell phone was, and we didn't. But this fella, he worked me hard, and I don't think he liked me about half the time. For the truth, I seemed like. But what it was, I was a kid, and I didn't know what I was doing, and he was showing me the right way. I just didn't understand. At the time, I just didn't think he liked me. He was grouchy. But but what he did do, we stayed in the woods all the time, and we killed a lot of fur. We worked for timber companies, and we killed beavers, what we did. And the state at that time paid a bounty on beaver. And of course, we caught everything we could catch while we were there. And but he did something I didn't understand then, and it's crystal clear now. Once in a while, he'd come out of the woods, and we'd go to the NTA, the National Trapper Association, would have events. And we'd go to those, and he'd put on things and show the kids how to catch beavers or otter. And but the worst thing he did for me at the time was we would go to Montgomery, and he would testify before the state legislatures because they were trying to outlaw trapping. And I didn't understand why we were wasting our time down there, because I wanted to be in the woods killing something. And what he did is, and unfortunately back then, it wasn't the antis out of California that we were battling. It was sportsmen. It was the fox hunters and the coon hunters and the quail hunters and the squirrel hunters and the rabbit hunters. Everybody that had a dog, we would catch them in their trap. And I don't know about Mississippi, but in Alabama, in those days, people didn't pay property lines very much attention. You just went where you felt like going. And today it's a different world. But so even though you had the exclusive right to be on that property trapping, you might catch somebody's dog because they just come over there and went hunting. And so those people at that time, especially the coon hunting organizations, they testified against us and tried to outlaw it. And the biggest memory I have in Montgomery was one of the fox hunters. He actually brought his dog before the legislature, and he cried big tears, and his poor dog had been in somebody's trap. And that annoyed the heck out of me. I don't know why we were wasting our time down there with that stuff, but now I understand if Dawson and other men like him hadn't done that, I wouldn't have my trapping rights today. It would have went away. And
same thing happened here.
Yeah, I've got.
That was the closest we ever came to losing trapping.
I was trying to help Georgia do some things, and I found some newspaper articles where some of their senators actually published articles in the papers talking about little children would get caught in traps, and nobody could find them. They'd be days in the woods. I'm like, what are you drinking, smoking something? But anyways. And Georgia was actually founding their trapping organization at that time. And Alabama was young, and that trapping organization that existed then, it went out, and we have a new one. And Mississippi, I think, is in that now. Their organization has had some trouble, and now Chip's trying to put the strength back to it. But what the NTA, the National Trapper Association, does, it's most organizations like the National Rifle Association is the hierarchy, works down, I guess. They talk to their affiliates in different states and sort of guide them as to what to do. And the NTA is built the other direction. It's ruled from the bottom up. Each state organization that's affiliated, Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, Arkansas, we all send a rep to the national, and the board tries to guide the direction that the NTA takes. It's not ruled from the top down. It's the only organization I know ruled from the bottom up. Is state government, you were what? Commissioner. So I guess you would say state government maybe is ruled from the bottom up. It's supposed to be ruled by the people? No? It's supposed to be. All right. But, and I try to say that the NTA serves a role that the National Rifle Association serves for gun owners. Only we don't have the Constitution to back us up. Fortunately in the South, things are pretty good lately. You're from Florida, Mississippi. We haven't had any real issues in the last several years to come against us. Actually, we've had legislation that actually helped us out and got some burden off of us. It's not the same. It's not the way up north. The anti-trappers, the anti-hunters, anti-fishermen, they're anti-everything. They don't like chicken farmers. They don't like, it's Wild Earth Guardians, Humane Society of the United States, Friends of the Animals, those kinds of groups. They've learned now to use the Endangered Species Act against us. And an example is the lynx. The lynx is not an endangered animal. It's the southern boundary of the lynx is more or less on the Canadian border. They do come into the U.S., but not very far. It's just Canada or Alaska is pretty much their home range. And for some unknown reason, the United States, in the American Endangered Species Act, called the lynx endangered. The few cats that are in America is a small population, so it's endangered in America, which doesn't make sense to me. Well, guess what? We get federal lawsuit after federal lawsuit where Wild Earth Guardians sued the state of Maine because roughly 2,000 lynx travel back and forth from Canada into Maine. Well, you might catch a lynx in your trap. So they sued to stop trapping in Maine. The Maine Trapper Association and the National Trapper Association and U.S. Sportsman's Alliance, they helped on that, spent over $2 million on that lawsuit in 10 years to get this done. Finally, do what?
They got money.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, just Humane Society of the United States takes in $100 million a year. The National Trapper Association, we work on about a $600,000 budget. It's hard to fight that kind of stuff. In Maine, they got what they call an incidental take permit at the end of the 10 years. They're allowed to accidentally catch 3 lynx or kill 3 lynx by accident in 15 years. If they catch 4, that's everybody. That's the state of Maine. That's the whole state of Maine. They got a bunch of restrictions. They got a bunch of restrictions on their trap, and they got these exclusion devices, which are these cage-like things that animals have to go in, and supposedly a lynx can't go through that. Well, within 30 days of them getting this permit after 10 years, they caught 2 lynx by accident. And they were both small lynx that could get through the cage. Well, if they catch that 4th one in 15 years, they'll shut trapping down in Maine on a cat that's not endangered. Well, the anti sued and says the incidental take permit is not legal, that the Department of the Interior cannot issue this permit. And they lost, but it was more legal battles. They turned right around and sued in Montana because there's some links that come into Montana. And there's a lot of liberal judges in Montana that like to rule against sportsmen. So the antis have camped out in Montana. They sued Montana. The National Trapper Association, we went at it alone. Sportsman's Alliance didn't show up. We helped the Montana Trapper Association. We spent $80-something thousand, the NTA did, just on attorney fees, which is a matching fund for the state organization. The Montana Trapper Association had to come up with their own $85,000. I don't know what Mississippi's got in the bank in their trapping organization, but I'm sure you got a rare animal or something in Mississippi that could probably be caught in a trap.
Bears are going to be the big issue if all of them.
Well, they love to sue for bears too.
Yeah, that's
What my point is getting at, in the South, we're vulnerable. We all have a rare animal or something around. And if this bunch decides to sue in the South, I don't know what we're going to do if we got to come up with a couple of $1 million for a lawsuit. They sued Montana. The National Trapper Association filed as an intervener, as a third party in this lawsuit. The state of Montana decided to cut their losses, and they settled this case around the NTA, even though we spent all this money on it. And what they got, they didn't lose trapping, but they restricted their traps pretty hard, and lots of rules, and a lot of people in Montana were upset about it. Well, Wild Earth Guardians, they weren't satisfied with that. So they got it put on the ballot. They brought a team of people from California into Montana and got enough signatures. They needed 25,000 signatures to make it a ballot issue, and they tried to vote trapping out in Montana. Montana Trapper Association is back under the gun. The NTA helps. We raised $750,000 to advertise and fight this ballot issue, and we won. When it came to a vote, we won. Wild Earth Guardians sues Idaho with the exact same lawsuit. We've done it in Maine. We've done it in Montana. We were so afraid Idaho was going to settle this issue around us just like Montana did, and thank God Idaho stuck to their guns, and we won. Idaho won this deal. They had to do a little size restriction on their traps, use a smaller trap, and but they got an incidental take permit exactly like Maine did. And we do. We feel like if Montana had stuck to their guns, we'd have had a good result there. But, I mean, we had our legs cut out from us, so we couldn't do anything.
The biggest thing with all that, and I work for the government,
yeah.
Most of the time people give up.
Right.
They want to take the deal.
Right.
And think they're going to win.
Well, right now, Idaho thinks the ballot issue is coming to Idaho. And we're all getting ready. We're going to have to campaign in Idaho now to keep from being voted out. I pray this administration we have now changes the Endangered Species Act to where we don't have, because it's just, it's a constant stream of lawsuits and lawsuits. We'll see. What I'm getting at is for trapping organizations, which Chip wants me to talk about, is Mississippi right now has no issues, no problems. Alabama, where I'm from, has no issues. In Tennessee and Arkansas and the South is pretty insulated at the moment. But we have to play our part. Every year we cut a check, do we not? And we send our money to the National to go for these fights. And we just pray we don't ever need them in the South. I'd rather we just kept sending the money to help the other guys to keep us out of the fire. We can't wait till we're in trouble and then go to, you understand? The National Trapper Association is a phone call away. If Mississippi is dead broke and never has a penny, if you have an issue, a ballot issue or a lawsuit, a federal suit, or some kind of even in-state legislative issues, Chip, I think, is your representative. The NTA is a phone call away. And if he calls and says, I need help, the NTA will be here to help. And that's, I don't know how else to say it. We all need to be on we're weak and vulnerable as we are, even though things are as good as they've ever been in the South that I've seen. The NTA is all we've got. There's other trapping organizations, other national organizations that do different things, but the NTA is the only one in all these fights in Idaho and Montana, and like I said, Sportsman's Alliance did take part in Maine.
This what you're talking about right there. In Mississippi, they started, it may have been 4 years ago, that issue, they were fixing to look at restricting snares.
Yeah.
So we got together, we went before our commission, talked to them, and ever since then, they've allowed us to be, we have a one time each year that we can go before the commission. We go through trapping, they get to ask questions. The things that I've learned with state agencies like that being run by certain people. Very few people know much about trapping.
Yeah.
And there's nothing to them. So when it does come up,
right,
nobody does that anymore.
Well, I mean, there's not, I doubt if there's a tenth of the trappers there were when I was a young fellow. But saying that, there's not as many squirrel hunters, and there's not as many rabbit hunters as when I was a kid. And there may be more deer hunters now because we got more deer, but yeah, and I think across the board it's all dropping, and we get weaker as a whole, I guess. We get more vulnerable to this kind of stuff. And I hope we're past where, when I was a kid, one sporting group works against the other. I hope we're past that. It's there's enough land and enough game out there for the fox hunters and the coon hunters and the trappers and the squirrel. It's enough for everybody. And thank God, I think we're all a little more. We're not 100%, but we work together better than we used to, I guess. Way to put it. All I can say, I guess the whole theme of it is support your state organization, make it as strong as you can. If you can't do anything but just be a member, that's great. If you can help out with whatever Chip's doing today, carry the garbage out, whatever, everything helps. And fundraisers, we're always, that's the story of my life, is begging for money. We're going to have a banquet in April, I think, if we can find the building. I'm also vice president of Fur Bears Unlimited. Have you heard of this? Nobody's heard of us. Thank you. Fur Bears Unlimited, we give scholarship money to kids that are taking biology courses, or that's their intent to be a biologist in some fashion. We give 6 scholarships away a year. We also give grant money on research. We just gave a bunch of money to Illinois, is doing studies on how many cats they have. It's southern Illinois now, they're allowed to catch 1 bobcat a year. In northern Illinois, they're not allowed to catch a cat at all. And so we funded some research there to try to prove to the people in charge that they have more cats than they think they have. We funded research on the Canadian border to study this lynx issue and what kind of migration we're getting back and forth on the cats coming across the border. But we fund more than that. We just sent a lady in Alabaster, Alabama, some Christian school. She bought a Nutri-Rat skin from us. I don't know why, but she bought a Nutri-Rat, and she got one of the coloring books, and the coloring book teaches kids about the invasion of the Nutri-Rat. So she called me up and wanted to know how much she could buy 8 more coloring books for. Anyways, in a long story, she had 350 students, and she's going to teach them with 8 books. And I asked her, I said, why just 8? She said, that's all I think I can afford. So I wrote her a grant, and we just gave her enough books for 350 kids. And we do a lot of that. We just sent 600 books to Kansas, to a Indian school out there. And that's what FBU does. We're in a teaching, an educational, we're just trying to make the public aware of what fur bears are. And we're a conservation-based. We're not a preservationist. We don't think they're all fuzzy little teddy bears that do good things. But
you go out west right now around the Yellowstone area,
mm-hmm.
and with the wolves.
Yellowstone's a bad deal.
The elk population and the moose population is just about.
Yellowstone elk population fell from 20,000 elk to less than 4,000 today. At the time they introduced the wolves, they had 3,200 moose in the park, and they have just over 200 today in the park. I could talk this stuff all. University of South Carolina had two trappers, Rusty Johnson and Texas boy, what's his name? Mark June. They caught 33 coyotes. How many coyotes? 32 or 3 at Wedowee, Alabama, and they put GPS collars on them and turned them loose. And they programmed their computer to watch like a quarter of a mile circumference, a half-mile circle. And 1 out of 4 of those coyotes went outside that grid, and some of them didn't come back for 3 months. So a 50-mile area, and they went out. Anyways, they tracked one of those female coyotes to a den the following spring and put a camera on that den, and that female coyote and her mate brought 17 deer fawns back to that den in 30 days. The first 30 days they had the camera out. And I thought, if every deer hunter knew that, and the turkeys are the same thing. Wild Turkey Federation did a study at Mobile. They found 43 nests, put cameras on these nests, and 41 of those nests were robbed by coons. And I don't know how that message doesn't get out, but deer hunters spend tons of money on their. No, well, Alabama has changed that. I don't know what Mississippi does, but in the South, our fur, in a good fur year, our fur has some value, but most of the time our fur has very little value. And trapping in the South has become a damage control thing. You're working for counties or road departments to kill beaver, timber companies. Or you got coon problems in the row crops or in town, or right. Coons are big bit. You get a coon in somebody's attic with a litter of pups, they're ready to pay and get rid of it. And I got a buddy in Georgia that says bats are by far his most profitable. He said people are terrified of bats, and it's not a fur bear, so I don't cover it, but yeah. But I mean, people make a living and make a very good living, controlling beaver and coons and coyotes. And I wish the fur markets would come back, but I don't expect it'll do it in my lifetime. Americans don't wear fur anymore. We're dependent. Most of our fur, almost all of our fur, goes overseas. South Korea buys our muskrats. Germany buys our gray foxes and what have you. Most of our beaver go for Stetson hats, do they not? And yep. And coyotes we use in this country for trim around jackets and stuff, but almost all of our foxes and coons and everything go to China or Russia or some of that stuff.
Even like San Francisco, they started banning. They don't allow it to be sold.
Yeah, you can't even sell. I don't know. California is a lost cause. Excuse me?
Casters is where your money's at.
Yeah, the casters are worth more than the beaver, yeah.
This year, after that, they cannot sell any darn anything.
I don't know. Any questions?
I'm from Alabama, Bangman. You're our rep, right?
I am. Did I do something wrong?
I see you online a lot, but I've never met you before.
You probably saw me arguing with somebody or getting in trouble or something.
I'm new to this.
Uh-huh.
I'm a hobbyist, and I do it for, like you were saying, predator control on a hunt club. That's how I got started. But I started a little Facebook page because I noticed about getting these kids in there. They don't recruit, which I know us older guys.
Alabama has a program. We do workshops, youth workshops scattered around the state. I think we have 10 booked this winter, and Mike will push it. We'll try to get 12, but he says it's a weekend deal, and he says that he refuses to work Christmas weekend or Thanksgiving, so So about 12 is all we can squeeze in.
Like I do, just through knowing people. We bring a lot of my two young sons' friends that are not hunters or trappers with us.
Right.
Which kids don't like set days, guys, just so you know that.
Yeah.
You know?
What town do we do a workshop in down by Mobile? Spanish Fort.
Yeah,
There you go.
it's right down the road from us.
Yeah, we do a workshop there. I'm not usually at that one. Mike keeps me in the north.
Do you think it does any good? Like, I've been asked to go to several hunting clubs, and we do the hand in the trap challenge, and we show people, especially deer hunters, because it seems like really nobody in our area, South Alabama,
Right.
very few guys, they either do it professional, ABC,
Right.
or guys like me that are just hobby, and it is starting to gain popularity with the deer hunters and turkey hunters.
Yeah. Like I said, it's better now in Alabama, in the South in general, than I've ever seen it. Though I think a lot of deer hunters and turkey hunters are waking up to the fact that we can offer a very good benefit to them just to get these predators out of there.
Do you really think it makes, or do we need to, as individual trappers, direct them to an association as well?
Sure, sure.
Shows up, and I'm not a pro. Some of these guys around here today are pros. You don't want to teach nobody wrong, but you want to give them enough the basics and point them in the right direction.
For sportsmen, outdoorsmen, hunters, fishermen, trappers, maybe 10% of the population participate and understands what we're talking about. And then maybe 10% are the foam at the mouth, anti, you shouldn't harm a fly. But there's about 80% in between there that get a vote and get a say-so in what we all do. And those people we need to get the message to. We'll never convert the nuts, I guess you'd call it.
But I will say this, and I'm old. But the Facebook stuff, I'm telling you, people got to remember, and we got to make sure these younger folks, and older ones too, that is putting this crap on them.
Yeah, yeah.
That can be more harmful than they'll ever
I agree. We teach in the workshops that we have in Alabama, we have a talk about that, and don't throw your deer carcass on the 4-lane for everybody to see and that kind of stuff, and it's just common sense, but you'd be surprised. I mean, in a big dead deer on top of your truck through town 15 times, I know you're proud of it, but there's that 80%, that they don't necessarily want to see that kind of stuff, and they get the vote. If this ballot issue comes, I mean, they tried in Montana to have a ballot issue that would stop all hunting and fishing. And most of us sit around and go, well, that'll never pass. But this country's changing, you bet. I mean, there are people voted for that. And you think, why? But
you got to remember, you got people in Congress right now that are saying that you don't need farmers because you got grocery stores.
oh yeah,
You got dumb.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, that was on national news. This person said that.
Well, it's. But there's a huge part of the population that thinks that way now, and our children are not exposed to this anymore. And it's a endless story. Keep teaching and keep showing, but most of them are like me, getting a little silver-haired, and it's not. And that's why we do the workshops in Alabama, to keep the young folks. And we put about 300 kids a year through that. And it's in cooperation with the Game and Fish. It's on the Game and Fish website. They sponsor it, and then most of the Alabama trappers do the heavy lifting to make it happen.
What you're talking about there with working with the department, that's one of the best things, but no fun here, but Fish and Wildlife is not for hunting.
Yeah.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife, I worked with them for years.
Well,
in law enforcement.
another.
It is not pro hunting, trapping. They are not.
Well, they have to.
The agency, now, there's people within it.
They have to hold a balance, I guess, and you got all those people that don't hunt, and they want to walk the trails and ride their bikes and
I worked too much with them over the years.
that kind of stuff, and
And I saw stuff that really shook me.
it's a fragile thing in this country, and we can lose it so quick. I mean, we've lost things in my lifetime I'd swear we could have never lost, and I'm fairly ashamed. Kids in my community are dumb as a rock. I don't understand how we could, on YouTube, speaking of YouTube, the two most watched videos, how-to videos, number one is how to cut your grass. I'm not joking. Number one, and number two is how to use a tape measure. I'm not kidding. And I'm thinking, if my dad were alive and I was a kid and didn't know, I'm wondering how hard he'd kick me to, you know. But you don't know how to cut your own grass. Where you been all your life?
Right now, you just think about real quick in our country, with the people that run Google, the people that run Facebook, the people that run Twitter, all these accounts, they are not.
Yep.
Now remember, they're monitoring everything. I listened to something this morning that just shook me about Google.
Yeah.
And I said, that's fucking scary. But they, I mean, that's again. When we put our stuff on that, they got it.
Yep.
Everybody else has got to do whatever they want.
Yeah. Well, I don't think we can stay off of there.
No,
I mean, we have to communicate, but we need to use good judgment.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to go shoot a deer, then I don't have a problem with that, but you don't have to show him, you know, with his tongue hanging out and this kind of stuff. Be respectful about it. But that's what we try to teach the kids, and you can't teach old heads like me. If you got somebody as old as I am and they hate hunting and fishing, and well, they're always going to hate hunting and fishing, and you got to work with kids and young folks and grow into it. We just can't flip the switch and make it happen. And I don't know what happened in the last 20 or 30 years, but when I went to high school, we all left our gun in the back window of the truck so we could hunt when we got out of school evening. And now a kid can't even chew his toast into the shape of a gun now without a federal investigation. So I don't know what happened, but
I got a lady one time that law enforcement academy out there. I won't call her name. Dr. Bell probably knows. She was against hunting, fishing, trapping. Well, she was teaching the class out there.
yeah.
Somebody had told her that I trapped. Oh, she started throwing things out there in the class. Well, I got mad. I finally got her. And I asked her, I said, what do you do out of that?
Yeah.
She said, oh, I love to fish. Well, I walked up to the front of the class. There's 50 fellas in there, and women, probably a couple. And I put my hand on the desk like that. I just slapped it down.
Yeah.
And she just, oh, and I said, well, you enjoy that, don't you? And she got to looking at me. And I was doing that.
Yeah.
And she said, what are you doing? I said, what do you put your fish?
Yeah.
I said, you hear that? You suffocate every one.
Yeah.
And buddy, that woman,
I had I had a lady.
so shook up when she realized, I said, you just suffocated all them fish you had so much fun.
Yeah.
Wasn't in that box. And then she really changed.
We set up a booth at a Pioneer Days, they called it, in North Alabama. And it was just all the old, they had grist mills and all kind of different old things set up. And I had a lady that said she was a doctor's wife. She was a nice dressed lady. And she came up and saw the traps and the fur and stuff I had on the table. And she just like, oh, I feel so sorry for them. And she just went on and on about the suffering these poor animals suffered and stuff. And I talked to her like somebody and told her, you know, it's like anything else. We have to control it. And before she left, she asked me if I could come to her house and catch some armadillos that were digging up her flower bed. I'm like, what's the difference? I don't... But they just don't think. They don't put that together. You know, it's the same thing if you got a mouse in your house. You're not going to put up with it. It's one of God's creatures, but you're going to kill it and get it out of your house. And it's no different than catching a fox or a coon or a nutria-rat or whatever. And, yeah, that's right. That's right. You don't want to wipe all the wasps out. You're not on this mission to exterminate them, and we're not on a mission to exterminate the coyotes, but we have to control them. And
when he bought that land, he told me no more suckers. He didn't believe in none of that. And
Yeah.
He had it for a couple of years without it.
Right. Well, a lot of folks are against you trapping in.
Home, we got my daddy's house. I put
Yeah.
Well, you talk to them.
Beavers will make a believer out of somebody.
I never went and called them beavers either. I ain't coming over. I said, well, you gonna let me shot the fox? Oh, no. I said, well, then you talk to them beavers and see if you can't do it.
The local town where I live, the beavers have flooded the paved road that goes to the food stamp office. And the people can't drive and get in there, and everybody's in a panic now. They want those beavers gone. They understand. They have to go. But that's funny. People will suddenly get the idea once they have a problem.
That's the deal with it.
Right. And fellas, that's about all I got. I guess the motto is, if you're in Mississippi, by all means support the Mississippi Trappers Association any way you can, and bring a kid, you know, and take them on the line with you and get them started. But and if you can do more than that, then get in the National Association. Anything, FBU, we're always looking for money to. We give it all away, but and Mike's a strong supporter of the FBU. Every time he tells me to speak about it, I forget about it when I get up here. You're welcome. Tell me your name.
Kenny Prince.
Kenny Prince, thank you. You're my alligator man, are you not? I talked to you 2 years ago, I think, about alligator, and it was too cool.
Oh, really?
I think, when we had the Southeast
Oh, that's right.
over in Alabama. We're going to do that again a couple of weeks from now.
What do I want?
No, we're going to have the Southeast Regional in Rainsville, Alabama, October the 7th and 8th, 5th through the 7th.
I'm James Meadows.
Hi, James.
Good to meet you.
Good to meet you.
I'm a good friend with